Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning to you if you're in the different time zone. Welcome to our interlectures. That is a project by GSAM Urfu, my Graduate School of Economics and Management, of online open lectures for everyone interested that we've developed in response to COVID crisis and that we are mostly working online since March. This semester, intellectures are organized in the framework of our marathon, international marathon dedicated to 100th anniversary of our university, of Ural Federal University. And the marathon will run until November and will include some more intellectures, as well as other events that you are also welcome to join, like presentations of our partner universities, presentations of our programs, degree programs, and other programs. And we cordially invite you to attend all the events. Some info on the certificates for students who would like to receive them. They are available. You have to fill in a short feedback form after the lecture. I will send the link in the chat at the end of the lecture, and the certificate will be sent to you by email. Okay, let me introduce our today's speaker. Dr. Kazi Sohak, senior researcher of our Laboratory for International and Regional Economics, and he will talk about research publications in quality journals, a very topical issue, I think important for researchers all over the world and for our colleagues as well. I see some of our colleagues from our university here as well. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Use the raise your hand option. And otherwise, please mute your sound for the lecture. You can also write the questions in chat, and Dr. Kazi will answer as soon as he can. Dr. Kazi, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena. So, it's my pleasure to be with you. I see some of my colleagues and students and co-authors. So it's my pleasure to be with you. So today I'm given the topic to talk about the publication in the quality journals. So let me start. I think I should share the screen. So you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right, so Elena already introduced myself. I'm Kazi Sohak. I'm working Graduate School of Economics Management, Ural Federal University. This is the topic, how to publish your research paper in quality journals. So Elena, please take care of approving the people who want to join because it's coming to me as well.
Sure, I will be approving them as we go along, okay, if somebody wants to join.
Well, so the content of this today's presentation, so I'll be talking about the quality journal, like indexing and ranking. What do you mean by quality journal? Then planning process, writing process, manuscript title, abstract, introduction, motivation, review of literature, methodology, empirical, result discussion, conclusion, reference, searching the right journal prior to submission, dealing with rejection, then handling revision requires, then utilizing the report, resubmitting, and other things and common reasons for rejection, and wrapping up. So the very first thing is the journal indexing and ranking. So what do you mean by the quality journal? There are many journals. So which kind of journal that you are looking for to publish your study? That is a very important question, because there is a saying that a publish or perish. So that was a beginning, but now the academician, I mean all the institute, they care about the quality of papers. So quality of the journal. So which journal you're going to target your study, that is important. So the commonly worldwide accepted indexing or the abstract is a Scopus. If the journal is Scopus index that is acceptable. That's the minimum. In most of the institute, or maybe some institute, it can be relaxed, like ERA or some other indexing. But the commonly used that the university is going to recognize your publication if it is indexed by Scopus. Then Web of Science. Then the third one, I'll be talking about the ABDC, that Australian Business Dean Council. The last one I will focus on ABS, that Association of Business Schools. So also in some other countries, they can have their own ranking. But this is the in general, the people or the most of the institute or the university are following this kind of ranking. The very first thing is the Scopus. Scopus is the Elsevier abstract and citation database. So they cover roughly like 36,377 journals, and most of them are peer reviewed. So out of all these journals, since I'm from an economics discipline, I'll try to stress on economics journal in my presentation. Because if you talk about the pure science, I do not have any experience. And moreover, in terms of publication, there is no rule of thumb. It is very much my personal, the experience and views that I came across over the time. So in Business and Management and Accounting Journal, Scopus Index is around 1,659 journals. And in the discipline of economics, econometrics, and finance, there are 1,160 journals that is indexed by Scopus. So from here, you can have idea that, okay, the paper publication is difficult or not, because in economics and econometrics or business, there are not much journal that is indexed by Scopus, though it is a very liberal index system. Then let's come to the Web of Science. That Web of Science is a little bit more, strict in terms of the index system. So the Web of Science is coming from the Thomson writers. So they have several the core collections. In not all the journal indexed by Web of Science having impact factor. So there are two kinds of journal in Web of Science. They are having impact factor. So that's the first is a Science Citation Index that called SCI. They have impact factor. So based on the impact factor, what do you mean by impact factor? Meaning that total publication total citation divided total publication. So per paper, how many times they are going to be cited by another index journal. Not every single journal, but it has to be another index journal by Scopus or Web of Science. So based on this impact factor, they're going to have a quartile distributions. The first quartile, second quartile, like the 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100%. So this and another citation is the social science citation index. That's necessarily the economics, business, and management journals belong to social science citation index. So I just try to give a very little, statistics to understand that how difficult to publish in this kind of a journal. If you see here, economics, in terms of the economics, there are 371 journals total in economics discipline. So out of 371 papers, there are 92 Q1, and another 92 is a Q2. So another 92 is a Q3, then Q4. So now all over the world, all the university, all the researchers, they are fighting to publish their paper in this journal from economic discipline. Those who are working the finance and the business discipline, even there are only 108 journals, they are having impact factors. So you can see the competition. There are many universities, there are many economists, many researchers. So everyone is trying to publish because publication is important for many reasons. I'm not going to talk about it since you know already the importance of publication, creating the knowledge in academia. Then another one is the Art and Humanities Citation Index. So these three categories having impact factor. Then recently they have another index journal. It's called Emerging Source Citation Index. So they are recently indexed by Thomson Reuters, but they still do not have impact factor, but in future maybe they will have. Then the another category is the Science Citation Index expanded. Also, it's a non-impact factor journal. So, but as long as it is a Web of Science index, so the journal is accepted. I mean, in general, the most of the institute is going to accept your paper. So, but social science citation or the pure science citation index journal are very prestigious and quite difficult to publish there. Then Australia and New Zealand, they follow their own ranking. So Australian Business Dean Council, they endorsed 2,682 journals. So their classification is different. So the first category is the A star. They call it A star. So in economics, there are 199 A star journals. Then in finance, in total, in all disciplines, they have 199 A-star journals. So out of 199 in economics discipline, there are 37 journals. In finance category, there are only 13 journals. Regarding the A category in economics, the total they have 651 journals, and in economics they have 93 journals in A. So, this journal, if you compare with Web of Science, that SSCI, Social Science Citation Index, is more critical than ABDC. So, but in some cases, let's say in some journals, according to Web of Science, there is a Q1, but not necessarily it has to be A star in ABDC. And sometimes like a Q2 paper in Web of Science, but it is regarded as A rank in ABDC, but this is few exception. But in general, you will see the common trend, like those papers are very high papers in all kind of indexation systems that is high. And the last one is a very conservative index system. The ranking system is Association of Business School. That is mainly in UK based. So this, they have, if you look at their categories are 4-star, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it is unlike Q1, Q2. It's not like that. So their evaluation also is different. So if you talk about the 4-star journal in economics, there are only 6 journals, like American Economic Review, Journal of Political Economy. So only 6 journals, 4 stars. And in finance discipline, there are 3 journals. They call it 4-star. And on 4, in economics, there are 17 journals. And in finance, there are 5 journals. Then I didn't go through all these 3, 2, 1 because I had to count it manually. But the thing is, these journals are the leading journals, the 4-star, okay? So there is no by any chance you can publish any paper there. Their review process is too critical. Like, and if you can publish one paper in 4-star journal, that is going to change your life. Anyway, that is all about the journal ranking. So now let me talk about the paper. I mean, how you are going to prepare a manuscript. So before producing the manuscript, there is a first stage, I call it the planning process. In the planning process, what you need to consider You have to think about what kind of a topic you are going to address or you're going to talk about it. So that is very important. And you have to also think about it like, do not put so much information, so many things that you are going to address in your manuscript. So it is always preferable that you are going to address one key issue in your paper, okay? One key issue, but how you can make it very sophisticated, I will try to talk about it in upcoming slides. But make sure that you are going to solve one key issue in your paper, okay? Then you have to ask yourself three questions. Is it a good idea? Or will this idea contribute to ongoing debate? Will this solve a problem? Will anyone read it? Who would be the audience? Okay. So, you know, and sometimes uh, what kind of paper you should write. Let's say in journals, they are looking for particular manuscript focusing on the ongoing debate. Um, let's say I see that many economists, when there was a trade war between United States and China, so many economists, they try to stress on this subject because people are curious to know about it. Then when this pandemic started, the many economists, they try to stress on how to measure the impact of the COVID or the lockdown on economy or this kind of issues because it's ongoing debate. Then if you look at the sustainable development goals, all these goals are very important. So meaning the journal, the editors, audience, they are looking for this kind of paper. So researchers also try to focus like environmental issues, sustainability, then renewable energy. So there is the ample of paper. Many researchers are stressing on this kind of a topic because that's the ongoing debate. And it is relatively easier to publish and you will get many audience. And editor, think about your topic, like whether it will be cited once it is published, whether it will be cited or not, because his objective to promote his journal. So it's very simple. Now the thing is like, what about the topic you are thinking? If it is already done by somebody else, then what are you gonna do? Will it stop? So still you can do so, okay? If already it is done, what do you have to do? For in this semester, I'm teaching, let's say, econometrics, contemporary econometrics. So all the students, they need to produce a term paper. So they have selected the topic. So the very first thing is, I ask them to go over all the existing literature about the topic. Then I ask them to prepare a table. In the table, highlighting mainly the models, that what is the dependent variable and what are the list of independent variables they consider, and what kind of methodology they used. Then what is the key finding? So when they note down all this existing literature, the publication, that will give us a notion that what is not done and what is already is done by somebody else. So how we are going to do something different? Because if you are going to do the same thing, and most probably we cannot publish in the rank journal. Why? Because there is no originality of the paper. So that is very important. So how we are going to make something new in our paper. And most of the topic, there are plenty of papers that people publish. I can give you a tiny example from my experience. So a couple of years back, like me and my co-author, we are thinking about to produce a paper like the resource scarce theory, like whether the natural resources is a blessing or it is scarce for economic growth. So we found a numerous paper on the subject. Then we think, okay, how we can make a difference? We did the same thing, but we contextualized many important issues. Let's say that we said whether this relation is a conditional with some other circumstance. Those circumstances are not considered in that paper. Then we also was thinking that how we can make it different with the methodological issues. So with a new methodology, new data set, can make your paper different and by contextualizing some new issues. So this is how we can make it different, though there are many studies that's done on the topic. So based on all the existing literature, maybe you need to customize your idea a little bit. Then you can share your idea to your colleagues and some other like proponent if you have. But then sometimes it is also, I have a bitter experience to share the idea with somebody, some other people, because they can steal your idea. Not necessarily, that's an exception. An exception cannot be an example. And another thing you have to think about, like when you're in during the planning process, that whether once you are going to start this work, whether there is available data or not, or whether you can survey, uh, if you have this capability to conduct a survey or not. So let's say there are many people, they develop a very fantastic idea, very catchy idea, but the problem is there is no data to support his idea or her idea. So end of the day, they are not going to do anything. So you have to see whether there is available data or not, whether it can be time series data, it can be panel data or cross section, whatever the data is. So now come to the writing process. So when you're going to prepare a manuscript, this is almost a very common characteristics component in all types of paper. There is something common that you should have a title of your paper. Then there should be an abstract, then introduction, review of literature, then empirical methodology or theory, results and conclusion. That is then reference. This is very common component most of the people are doing. So now let's come to the title, how we can write your title. The important thing that the title has to be very attractive, because based on the title, that the first thing editor or the reader is going to read. So whether your title can snatch the attention of the reader or not, so have to be very, this is something very interesting. Um, it should capture a debate type question, refer to an important issue for corporations or the policymaker, and the title must be incoherent with your contents of the paper. So it should not be misleading. Let's say your title is something, but your content is something else. So it should not be like that. So it should reflect the main idea of your paper. And in the title, try to avoid some abbreviation unless it is well known, like US. In some paper, I saw like the people use the abbreviation like OFDI, outwards foreign direct investment. So it may not be, well known to everybody. So try to avoid this kind of abbreviation. And the title should not be very long. It should be very precise and concise. So that's about the title. Now, the abstract is very important of your paper, though it comes first, but you have to wait until your paper is done. So because abstract is a very important part of your paper, that the editor or the referee, the audience, the first thing they do, they try to read the abstract. So many people are not going to download your article. And there is a paywall in Elsevier or the Springer and all the publishers. And some people, they do not have access to download the paper. So what they can do, they can read the abstract. So the abstract should be very precise and concise and well written. So if there is any problem or the mistake in the abstract, so that gives a very wrong impression. So there is a high chance that your paper will get rejection if there is any problem in abstract. And moreover, you should try to avoid citation in the abstract. So it is not until unless it is too important. So in general, the researcher do not cite in the abstract. So now the thing is, what should be included in abstract? How we can write it? This style varies from journal to journal. But if you go through the top journal like American Economic Review or Journal of Financial Economics, so what type of style they follow? So very briefly, they say purpose of the paper. And sometimes even they do not say purpose of the paper. They, start with the findings, but that's not very common. That's a too high class paper, they are very precise and concise economy in their words, very concentrated words. So, but in general, the researchers do that, they try to figure out and highlight the purpose of the paper in first sentence. Then importance or the contribution of the paper. Then they say briefly the methodology. So what is my practice? I say like this is study where we investigate the impact of this and on that, corroborating or contextualizing these are the issues. Then we say about, okay, we apply these methodologies to analyze panel time series or cross-sectional data. Maybe we can extend what is the reason behind of it. Then after methodology, you should disclose the key findings of the paper. Then after the key findings, then we should write the main policy implications. So that's the abstract style in general. But what is my suggestion? So when you write the abstract, those who are the beginner, so you can go over a number of journals on the same idea. So how you can see their style, but make sure that you are not going to copy paste the similar idea because the similarities are big issues. But you try to paraphrase. So see the structure of abstracts. These are very important part. Then what should be included in abstract? Keep the abstract brief and to the point. Write 1 or maximum 2 sentences for each part above. And in general, the abstract, in some journal, they allow the total number of words 200. But as for me, I prefer 150 words, not more than that. And I do not cite in any study in the abstract unless until it is so important. Sometimes, let's say, you are going to apply a new methodology, very new methodology that is developed in 2020. So in that case, you can say, okay, this is an ongoing debate, but we reinvestigate these issues by applying this method developed in this. So that is an exceptional case. Still, we can cite, but unless it is so important, you should avoid citation in abstract. Then introduction. So this is a very important part of the paper. You should allocate more time to write introduction. So these are very tricky issues. In last number of years, I have been reviewing many journals, approximately from 50 journals, and most of them are Q1. But the thing is, very often I come across that their introduction is poorly written. What do you mean by the poorly written? So what are the things that should be included in introduction? The first thing, that is my practice, and my practice meaning that I try to follow Journal of Financial Economics, their style. I love that journal. Maybe I'm biased, but I love that journal. That's a 4-star journal. So what is the practice? The researcher when they're publishing Journal of Financial Economics. So what is the common practice in writing introduction? So the first thing is that they try to give a brief context. Why the context of the paper, why it is important, something like that. So after the context, from the first paragraph or a small paragraph, they start with the objective, what they are going to do, because it is not fair to keep the reader waiting and waiting what you are going to do. So it is always preferable to give a brief context. After the brief context, you should start your objective, what you are going to do in your paper. In some cases, in my some recent article in energy economics or economic system, even I start with the objective. I said, okay, we are going to do it. Uh, we are motivated to do it for a number of reasons. Then we said, these are the motivations. So number one, number two, number three, like that. So motivation of the paper is very important. I mean, what motivates you to conduct this study? Okay, so you can see some papers. I recommend you to go over the Journal of Financial Economics, those who are from economics and management or finance background. And the motivation, for example, there can be, you are going to propose a new methodology. So you can say, okay, all this study, they use this kind of a methodology, which can be questionable. They couldn't solve or address any very important issues that you are going to address in your paper. So you have to be very profound in telling that what is something new that you are going to do, and what are the main motivations that going to motivate you to conduct this study. So motivation like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And one thing you have to keep in your mind when you are going to write the motivation, that has to be reflected by your result. Sometimes you are going to write many things in motivation, in introduction, but those things are not supported in your findings. Then that's a two different picture. So in all the section in your manuscript, that should highlight a single story, but a different way of saying. So the motivation, whatever the motivation you are going to write in your introduction, that's going to supported by in your empirical findings. Let's say I'm giving an example. The impact of financial development on economic growth. So there are plenty of papers. Okay, there's some paper they found it's a positive role. Some paper they found it's a negative impact. And there's some papers, a stream of literature, they found an inverted U-shape relationship. They said it's a too much finance. Okay, so all this type of results it can be. So if in your study, if you are going to find a particular result, let's say inverted U-shaped relationship between financial development and economic growth, then your motivation should be written should be like that way. That is going to support your finding. Let's say, okay, what is the demerits of too much finance? So this is how you have to convince the reader. Anyway, so after the motivations, then you can have a brief literature. When you are writing a 2, 3, 4 motivation, you are going to cite the literature. But here, when you're writing introduction, do not write, okay, that researcher, they use this methodology, that methodology, like literature, if you know. Just here, try to cite just idea. And if you have a different literature review, then do not cite too much in introduction. Just try to show that your stand on the topic. That is important. So after the motivation, you are going to state that contribution of your paper. That's a very important paragraph in the introduction. Okay, so here you have to clearly state, as my practice, when I write the contribution is let's say the second last paragraph in my introduction. So what I do, I said, okay, my paper, this study is going to contribute, or this study has several contribution or going to contribute in number of ways. Let's say fourfold contribution. Then In my practice, how I write the contribution. So I try to give a brief context, meaning how I contextualize the idea. So that is my first contribution. Then if I have any methodological contribution, I try to write that. For example, in energy economics, my recent publication, when I was writing contribution, I wrote like that way that, okay, in the earlier literature, they didn't solve the cross-sectional dependence issues and serial correlation or endogeneity or blah, 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 when you're using the econometrics. So you have to write, okay, that your methodology is robust under this circumstance. So after methodological contributions, then you should write and your findings, whether it is new innovative findings or whatever issues you contextualize in your study. So that can give you new findings. So in that case, your findings should be highlighted very profoundly. Then in terms of the policy implication, whether is there in novelty or contribution or not, that should be highlighted in the contribution paragraph. Then you can say very briefly about your findings. Then you have to give next sections what they are going to provide or kind of information. So that is all about the introduction. Then as I already said about the motivation of the paper, that is so important. So when you write every single paragraph in your introduction, that should be a particular context. You know how to write a paragraph. So in the each paragraph of motivation, the first line is going to be an introductory sentence that what you are going to say in this paragraph. So you can elaborate by putting some more sentences. Then there should be a concluding remarks. Okay. So that is all about the motivation of your manuscript. Then the review of literature. So in this review of the literature, there is a many style of writing review of literature. So I'm going to say about my particular style of writing review of literature. Since, as I said, I follow Journal of Financial Economics, so their practice is like that. They do not write review of literature, or sometimes they write review of literature and hypothesis development. So, very often I see the researcher, they just give a summary, or this study is conducted by utilizing this data for that country, and they found this and that. Just a summary. But that is not my style, or the top journal, they do not write like that way. So what they do, they try to create a hypothesis. Okay, so how it is that? As for me, in any topic that I'm going to address in my paper, I try to find out all the literatures, and then I classify this literature. So let's say if we talk about the finance and growth nexus relationship. So what I'm going to do, I will try to find out a stream of papers or stream of articles. They found a positive relationship or the positive impact of financial development on economic growth. Then I will write, okay, this guy claimed that this is the way, this is the channel that financial development can spur or foster economic growth. Okay, so I try to write their all the stand. Then in the last sentence, I try to give my own stand. Then I start with the second stream. Okay, the second stream, let's say it's the contrasting findings. They argue that no finance is not going to help real economic growth. Then I try to give all the reasons that they mention in their paper. So what are the reasons? These things you have to spend a little more time, because this idea is going to help you to when you are going to write results and discussion. Because in the result and discussion, your empirical findings has to be supported by existing literature. And it can be a contrast. If it is the contrasting findings, then what is the reason for that? maybe it's because of the different data set. It can be different methodology. So here, the thing is, this is my style that I try to write uh, all the literature. So sometimes it's these findings is in line with my idea, and sometimes it can be contrasting, and some a stream of literature having no relation. Okay, so in that case, I will write the hypothesis. This is based on this contrasting findings or the contrasting literature that motivates me to conduct this study. Then we are going to do it again by using this method or this new data set, or by incorporating some of important role. Okay, this is how I try to develop the hypothesis. So mainly in my paper, I'm going to solve only one issue. In my recent literature, a recent paper in energy economics, I try to write the impact of financial development on renewable energy production. So that's a simple relation. But how I try to make it sophisticated, I give a different context, whether this relation is the same when the country, the government having a strict policy about environment, and those countries having no such a strict policies. Okay, then those country, let's say the fossil fuel rate is very high and low, like that. So we try to give a different context in the same relationship, and for every, we call it the cross-sectional variable. So for every cross-sectional variable, we are going to have a different hypothesis, but a simple relationship we are going to address in my paper. But by giving a different context, so we are going to have a different hypothesis. So this is the way to write my style. Okay, I'm not saying that this is the finest, the right style, but I follow Journal of Financial Economics. So it's nothing but it helps me to develop the hypothesis. Okay, and when you are going to cite, if you target a good journal, very big journal, then your citation should be big. Okay, that is important. If you are going to target your article to submit in American Economic Review, so if your citation is coming from, I mean, not that much prestigious journal, then there is a high chance you will get disk rejection. You know, all this high-class journal, okay, that they see that your list of citations, because that give a kind of impression whether your argument is based on a strong literature or not. That is important. So if you target a high-class journal, then you have to cite also very high-class journal. That's simple equation. And moreover, you have to think that which journal you are going to target your paper. So if you want to target a particular journal, try to cite more papers published in that journal. So it will give you a kind of a endorsement to the editor that, okay, so your publication is coming from this journal, okay? So meaning that the idea you develop that is in line with the scope of the journal. And the up-to-date latest literature is always preferable. So after literature review, as I said, it's not necessarily literature review, it's basically hypothesis development. So if you have a set of hypotheses, then in order to prove all these hypotheses, then you have to collect the data. So in literature, most of the people, what they do, they start with the data section. So in the data section, if you go through the Journal of Financial Economics, you will see that's a very intensive writing. They don't just say that we consider this variable, that variable. They give a very detailed explanation why you have incorporated this variable. So recently, let's say we publish a paper in a journal. The topic is whether globalization is reshaping the local institution in Islamic countries. Then all the variables we collect, the reviewer asked us that you have to write in a detailed way that why you have considered this variable, how it is important for explaining your dependent variable. So here you should uh, spend more time, allocate substantial time to write the main rationale for taking this kind of a variable that you are going to consider. Okay. After that, you should highlight the total, I mean, very detailed measures of that variable. Let's say I have given an example, the quality of governance, and as you know, it's an indexed variable. The index is coming from the different components. So we should write the every single component and what is their measure, what is their ranking from the 0 to 4 like that, okay? Because uh, this section is very important. So how you develop your data. And sometimes, let's say your data is you have taken the natural log, logarithm transformation. So you should highlight it. And sometimes your data is normalized with dependent variable. Let's say if you talk about the investment and GDP, whether this independent variable investment is normalized with GDP or not. So these things has to be clearly written in the data section. In my practice, after writing all this rationale for taking these variables or these proxies, I try to give also a table. In the table, in the first column, I write the abbreviation of the variables. Then I give a detail, I mean the long definitions of the variable. Then I try to give the source of the data. So that is a very convenient, a very comprehensive way that everybody will understand what are the variables you are going to consider in your study. Then you start with your empirical methods. So if you are going to apply an econometric approach, so very first thing is that you have to give also a rationale that why you are going to apply this methodology, not that methodology. So I can give you an example. Right, in my recent few papers, I applied, let's say, CSRT. So what is the main features of this methodology and why this methodology is a better to explain my data? Then I try to say, okay, in point by point. Let's say I said, okay, in my data, there is a cross-sectional dependency. If there is a cross-sectional dependency, I cannot use OLS on any other test. So I have to use that kind of a methodology that can handle this issue. Then I said, okay, there is a mixed order of integration. So if there is a mixed order of integration, what kind of methodology that can address? So it has to be very systematic writing, point by point. So what about the methodology you are going to use? It should not be arbitrary. Okay, I like this methodology and I apply it. No. So you should give a very rationale for using this methodology, why you have used this methodology. What is the logic behind of it? Then there will be many mathematical notations. So try to write it in a detailed way. And when this methodology is very well known, so no need to derive all these things. Like if you are going to apply OLS, so how OLS is done with the least square, all this derivation, it's no need to give it to people know about it, how it works. But in any case, if you are going to apply a new method that editor or the reviewer may not necessarily know about this about this methodology. In that case, you should write in detail about it, okay, about the methodology. Then I said about the data already. Then let's come to the empirical results. Mainly in economics and this discipline, mostly the people integrate empirical results and discussion. So in empirical result and discussion, what is my practice? And common practice is to just first thing they provide the data description, the descriptive table. So descriptive table, in some new papers, what they do, in sometimes, let's say in descriptive statistics, You can have original data, and sometimes you can have a logarithmic transformation. So if you put the logarithmic transformations, well, it is very difficult to understand. So what you can do, you can provide both with a when you are going to have a logarithmic transformation. So original descriptive statistics from original data and descriptive statistics from the logarithmic data. So you can provide it both. And it is always preferable when you write the descriptive statistics to try to show with the figures. But make sure that all the tables and the figures are the self-explanatory. So when I look at the table or when I look at the figures, uh, there is a all label, okay? So that I can understand without going through your text, what is the explanations of it. So after descriptive statistics, in descriptive statistics, my common practice is that, okay, I try to provide mean values, then standard deviation. So standard deviation is going to tell the discrepancy of the data, whether it is normally distributed or not. Then let's say range the minimum value or maximum value. Okay, so after the descriptive statistics, I also try to give a correlation matrix. So correlation gap matrix also give an initial idea that how the variables are correlated. So this is all about the descriptive statistics. Then come to the result and discussion, the main findings. So in the main findings, if you have a, let's say, set of hypotheses, core hypotheses, then the result, empirical result should arrange according to your hypothesis. So you can say, okay, hypothesis one. Then you provide the table in hypothesis one. So you can explain your result in a very precise and concise language and detailed, okay? Uh, let's say if it is based on the econometrics approaches. As for me, I do not say, okay, if it increased by this unit, it decreased by that unit. I do not talk about this mathematical, I mean, the slope. Rather, what I say, it, okay, it has a positive or negative or a statistically significant relationship. Then I try to give the reason based on my literature reviews or the motivation that I have done in the introduction. So I try to bring this information when I support the empirical findings. So, but the thing is, here I do not use the same language. So it's not a repetition, but with a different language, different way of saying, but the same thing. Okay, so we have to support our findings. So let's say if you find a positive relationship, how we can support. I have given an example like financial development and economic growth. So if you find a positive relation, now you can support with existing literature. Okay, so these researchers, they said these are the reasons that financial development can explore economic growth. All these reasons, then it is very important if you are focusing on a particular country, you try to give the anecdotal evidence, meaning that what is the reality, what's happening in that country. So if you give some anecdotal evidence, it will show your level of understanding. And when you go through the review process, then the reviewer, the reader or the editor will understand, okay, you have a deeper understanding about the subject. Meaning this result should be, highlighted, should reflect the reality. And by any chance, if you get a contrasting finding, then you should detail out that why this finding is contrasting with existing literature. So what the possible reason? Okay, so that is mainly the results and discussion. You have to compare with your findings. So when you are going to write, there is a very particular style of writing. When you write the academic journals, you have to very carefully the terms you are going to use. So let's say if you are going to use the huge, okay, then academician, the researcher will say, what do you mean by huge? So do not put the so many too much adjective or this kind of things, okay? For academic this writing, there's a particular language. So if you go through the many literature, you will understand what are the terms they're using. There are a few terms that try to avoid, it's not professional, like these, that, when you are going to start your sentence with this kind of things like these, that pronoun, then it's confusing. They do not like it. So I talked about these issues already. The table should be self-explanatory. You can see some top journal, how they organize the table and discussion, so you can follow. And when you write the discussions, when you are giving their argument, make sure that it is in line with your motivation. So your motivation is written something else, but suddenly your findings is in another direction. That is very hard to convince to the reader. Okay, then finally, we have to write conclusion. So mainly in conclusion, I try to write not only conclusion, I also add the policy implications. So conclusion and policy implication. Conclusion, what I write, again, I try to give a very brief context of the paper. Then I summarize the motivation in 1 or 2 sentences. Then I try to give a key findings. Let's say, for the beginner, it is very easy to write a conclusion like if you follow a structure. So we found our, let's say you can write like that way, that our empirical findings, from our empirical investigation, we found several findings. So number 1, number 2, number 3, like that. So after every single findings, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the findings you have, the key findings, then you can write a policy implication. The policy implication, actually, it should be based on your empirical findings. So policy implication, if you try to bring another information, okay, so that is not relevant, that is not supported from your findings. So that should not be your policy implication. So policy implication should be in line with your findings or empirical findings. In every aspect, so whatever the section you have in the whole paper from the beginning to end, the title, abstract, introduction, literature review, methodology, result and discussion, conclusion, that should give one information, one story, but different way of saying. So that's called coherence of idea, the coherence of writing. So that is very important. So after providing your policy implication, then mainly what we do, we write all the reference. For the reference, nowadays it is better, if you can use some software like Mendeley or EndNote, so that will make your life easier. Sometimes if you do it manually, so maybe there is some missing reference. And sometimes that some journals, they follow a very different type of citation style. So that's why in that case, you have to change your citation style. But in general, most of the journal follow APA style. APA style is very common. But if you use any software like say Mendeley or EndNote, then it is very easy to customize by software. So after reference, what are you gonna do? You have to search journal. Okay, so in the journal, who are the main publisher? The main publishers are the Elsevier, the Blackwell, Wiley, then Springer, Taylor, and Francis. So if you, let's say, if you target Elsevier, there is an option. If you write your title and abstract, so the journal can give you, okay, this is the suitable journals, and they will provide the acceptance rate. But sometimes it can be misleading and whatever it is. So, but as for my style, what I do, I from the very beginning, I target the journal. Then when I target the journal, then I try to download all the similar papers. So I try to cite it more. And moreover, I also try to cite the editor. So uh, when you target a journal, so what you should do, you should see the editorial board. Who is editorial? Who is editor, chief editor, and who was the editorial board? So you should try to cite them. It is always good, but not mandatory. But if you cite them, because when there is an editor of a journal, it what does it, it indicates that they are the eminent in this field. Okay, so there is a less chance that you are going to miss some important citation or important study in your paper. So this is my practice, that I try to cite some papers from the editor. After that, I have written here everything. Then you should go through the article preparation or process. So before submitting your paper, make sure that you check the similarity by Turnitin or authenticate, and if your university has access. Because if you target a good journal, let's say Web of Science, that SSCI index journal or SCI index journal, nowadays it's a common practice of all the journals. The first thing they do, they send the paper to check the similarity or plagiarism. So if your paper, let's say having a similarity more than 20%, then immediately you get the disk rejection. That for sure. Okay. So it has to be less than 20%. And not only less than 20%, from a single source, the similarity should not be more than 1%. That is also important. They also count that in your paper, how many similar words you used from a particular source. Okay, that's a common mistake. So that is one of the main reason for the disk rejection. Even I have this kind of experience. Recently, I didn't have the access for Turnitin initially, and I was thinking maybe there is no similarity. So I submit a paper in a top journal. Then they check the similarity, and somehow accidentally it become more than 20%. So they say, okay, we cannot proceed to your paper. That was very unfortunate. So please check your similarity. And if you are not native English speaker, if your paper is not good enough in language, so it is better to get some editorial support, or you can send your paper to some expert native speaker, those who are working on the proofreading, because in top journal, language matters, especially in economics field. Language is very important. Because you see, the referees or editor may send your paper back if the language is not adequate or reject. So you have to provide also some, not provide, but you see the similarity. So make sure that there is a similarity index doesn't show more than 1% from a single source. When we are going to submit, you have to check the required file. In most of the Elsevier journal and other journal, you have to provide the key findings. That's the highlights, let's say bullet point, and that's every single sentence should not be more than 80 characters or 80 words. I forgot. Anyway, so the bottom line is that you have to prepare some highlights by showing your key findings. 3 to 4, 5, 4. Then you have to prepare a title page. Then you have to provide the keywords. Then if it is a business and economics journals, then you have to provide the classification, jail classification codes. Okay. Then you have to prepare a cover letter highlighting. That cover letter should highlight your motivations or your contribution of your study. Okay, so then you can, most of the journal are peer reviews. I mean, it can be single blind or the double blind. So if it is single blind, meaning that editor and referee, reviewer can see your name, but you cannot see the referee. So that's a single blind. So nowadays in Elsevier, most of the journals single blind journal and double blind. That's a common practice. And some journal there is a submission fee, and some journals there is a publication fee. So if there is a publication fee, in general, if there is a publication fee, their review process is less critical. Then the journal is free for publication. Then after submitting your paper, in most of the journal, what they do, they take 1 or 2 weeks. So initially there is a process to see whether you fulfill all the requirement of the journal, you have submitted all the necessary files or not. Then if it is not, they will send you back. They will ask you to provide. Then after that, if it is everything is fine, then they proceed to the editor. So the editor go through your paper. After going through, if the paper is not interesting, or let's say there are some issues, then there is a chance like desk rejection. But this is very common. In top journal, let's say energy economics, I know energy economics, they reject around 80% papers. Recently, we have submitted a paper in Journal of Cleaner Production. So in that journal, when I saw the manuscript number, it's more than 20,000, meaning in this year, they received more than 20,000 papers. So, out of 20,000, let's say they are going to publish 1,000 papers. So 80% of papers are rejected either from the desk rejection or from the review process. So that's a very common. So now the thing is how you can deal rejection. In the good journal, as I said, 80 to 90% papers are rejected. So it's not necessarily your paper is bad. Sometimes I know it's a very discouraging. It can make you cry, like if you're a PhD student. So it's very disappointing. But you have to cope. I get used to cope with that. Rejection is common. So after getting the rejection, so if you get some comments, if it is desk rejection, that's very unlucky. In desk rejection, normally they said, okay, your paper is not interesting, or it's out of the scope of the journal. So you do not get any specific comments that will help you to improve your findings, your paper. But the thing is, if the paper is rejected through the review process, then you will get the very good comments. So you can address your paper and you find another suitable journal to submit it. So that's all. And sometimes, let's say, if you get rejection, some invalid reason, so whether you should write editor or not, normally, if you write to editor why they have rejected your paper, they will not answer, and sometimes they may answer. So it is better not to argue with the editor. You try to find out another journal. And if you get a review request, okay, so it can be major, it can be minor, but there is no chance that the paper is accepted as it is. That's a very, exceptional case. You may get a minor revision or major revision. So after addressing all the comments, you have to prepare a file, point by point, all the comments, and address your response. So normally 80% paper or 90% paper is accepted when you submit the revised version, unless it is major revision. So it's a major revision, and sometimes it is very difficult to address. Sometimes It may not possible, or it's very difficult. It's like writing a different paper, new paper. So this is up to you. You can address all these comments, or you can find a different journal. Okay, so that's all. If you have any question, I'm open for you.
We have a question in the chat from Naila.
Okay,
about policy implications.
Well, about the policy implication, as I said, that's the policy implication necessarily should be from the key findings. Okay, whatever. Let's say in your study you found corruption. Let's say the corruption is helpful for your economic growth. That's contrasting findings. It may not be. So what should be your policy implication? Your policy implication, you should write that, okay, maybe your country has having some kind of a bureaucratic problem. So it is a very difficult process to get something done. But those who are providing kind of a bribe, it's kind of a speed money for a quick process. Okay, so then it indicates that the system has to be improved. So because of this complicated process, even corruption is helping. Okay, so you cannot write like, okay, you found that corruption is not detrimental, is rather promoting for economic growth. Then you have to write in that way. Your policy implication should be right that way. You cannot write, okay, the institution quality has to be improved. You can write it in policy, I mean, your institutional quality should be improved, but in that way, that, okay, all this process has to be faster. So policy implication and your key finding should not be the two different stories. That is the key point you have to remember. Any other question?
There are also some questions in the chat. Can you see?
Impact factor, sustainable development 4.08. It's indexed in Q1 in both Web of Science and Scopus. So it is ISI and SSCI index journal, and publishing here is quite challenging. Yes, I do agree. However, there is a journal ranked as C in ABDC and unranked in ABS. Why there is so, although it is supposed to be ranked at least A in ABDC and 2 in ABS. So is there any political issue? I do not know the answer of this question. It depends on that country, the council who is going to rank the journal in ABDC. So there are many issues. So what I know from my personal contact and some editor, they were very unhappy that why ABDC put their journal in C category. They think it deserves to be A or B. But that is their internal evaluation system. But as I said, that ABS is a very critical ranking. You see then in economics, only 6 journals, 4 stars. But for my experience, ABS is very accurate because sometimes Web of Science can be misleading. Why? Let's say I have a paper in renewable and sustainable energy review. The impact factor of this journal is more than 12. And I have also paper in energy economics, where the impact factor 5 point something. So what does it mean? So does it indicate that renewable and sustainable energy is a much difficult journal of energy economics? No, because that's an interdisciplinary journal. So interdisciplinary journal, the review process is not that critical, like in the pure discipline, like energy economics. So when you submit energy economics, necessarily your paper will be reviewed by the economist, not environmentalist. Okay, so that's the issues. So in any kind of ranking, it may vary. So what are the methodology, what are the measures they consider in ranking, that is important. What do you mean by new method or methodology? How do you think that? Well, in if you talk about the econometrics method or methodology, the approach, so every day or every year research is changing because a new issues in economy, like when OLS was developed, that was a particular context. Now when economy become globalized, then econometrician was thinking, okay, so one country is connected with another country. So one country development may influence another country. So they try to develop that kind of a methodology, what OLS could not do. So it's changing, it's upgrading by incorporating a different context. Any more question? How about the proofreader? Is it mandatory? Well, so if you target a good journal and if the author is not native English speaker, not necessarily not native speaker, let's say there can be some mistake, some typos, okay? There can be some grammar mistake. Also, the sophistication of writing is important. First of all, you have to understand the reality. Then the top journals, let's say all over the world, all the researchers, they're fighting to publish, but they will select, they are very selective, they're picky, they're going to select a few papers. So if your paper having a language issue, of course, they are not going to consider it. They will find a reason to reject it. So it is better to send your paper to a professional proofreader if your language is not good enough. Is there any difference between PhD work and publishing research in the top journals? There is a significant difference. In a PhD thesis if you mean the PhD thesis, that's a very detailed, comprehensive, let's say 150 pages or 200 pages. When you're writing a journal, it will be like 20 pages or 25, 30 pages. And that's a very concentrated stuff. So every single line, every word matters in journal. Where the thesis, you can incorporate many information or less relevant information. But in journal, there is no chance. So writing journal is much more difficult. Can you explain jail code? Jail codes is the American Economic Association, I think. So Journal of Economics, I cannot remember the full form. It's kind of a classification. It is from American Economic Association, something like that. So they classify the economic journal. So if your paper is about the macroeconomics, you will get a particular code. If your journal focusing on finance, you will get a different code. Okay, so based on the topic of your journal, you can see the similar code that reflects. Then there is another private questions. I think I already explained about it. Sustainable development, as you said. Particularly sustainable development editor is from Thailand. I know him, and this journal is very faster. So within 2-3 days, you will get some news whether the paper should go through the review process or not. In all UGC certified journals are okay for research work publication. What do you mean by UGC certified journal? I don't know. UGC. Who is UGC? But it is like it depends. I said in the most of the country, most of the institute, university, they accept Scopus. But some university, they prefer higher Web of Science. So that is the two ranking is generally accepted. But in UK, some of my friends, they say, okay, when It is their promotion concern, so that they have to publish at least 3-star journal for their promotion purpose. So they are fighting for that. It depends. It varies from country to country. Suppose a certain methodology is not much new. You are using a context where it is not previously used. It is a contribution. Okay, that's a good question. And somehow I missed this issue in my presentation. Basically, I have given an example of Journal of Financial Economics. That's a very top journal. You know, they don't care about methodology. Still, people are publishing the paper by using OLS or the fixed effect, simple fixed effect. But if you read this paper, the context, the way they design, the way they develop the methodology is fantastic. So they have a story, a very unique story, so new knowledge they are going to provide. So their main focus is not methodology, it's rather a story. But if you target economic modeling or applied economics, so there are some kind of a journal that care about a methodology. It has to be very, very robust. So with a methodology contribution, you can get acceptance. So you have to make sure that what kind of contribution you have, whether it is in terms of the story or in terms of the methodology or in terms of the new findings or policy implication. But there should be some kind of a contribution if you target a good journal, I mean index journal. Sir, I am going to help to do masters in my field before a PhD. This is going to help to do masters in my field before a PhD, and it's publishing in a local journals are not ranked in ABDC or Scopus is taken into consider for granting findings. It also depends on the university. Okay, in some university, let's say if you are targeting University United States, their main focus is on your GRE score or GMAT score rather than publication. But if you look at the Europe university to get a scholarship or Australian university, they care about your rank publication. So it is always preferable if you have some publication in rank journal. At the initial stage, what you can do, you can collaborate with a established researcher to publish in a good journal. Okay. Can you please say about robust of results and methodology? Well, the robustness check, what is robustness check? Meaning, as I said, the relation between finance and economic growth, okay? So you have used a particular measures of financial development. Let's say money supply, let's say credit to the private sector, or you used bank asset, okay? Then with the different proxies, whether your result is consistent or not, that is one kind of a robustness. Then you change the methodology. That is another kind of a robustness. Then you can use a different context. Okay, you see, let's say you split your sample countries based on the high technology, low technology, with a high institutional quality, less institutional quality. So how this result is consistent. This is the consistency of your findings under different circumstances. That is the robustness of findings. Suppose certain methodology is not that new. Okay, I think I replied all this already this question. Any more question? Okay, so thank you very much for your patience. So, Irina, you have something to say?
Yes, I would like our participants to ask our participants to fill in the feedback form. I'm sending the link in the chat again, just in case. Please fill it in. so we can know what you think, and so we can know whether you need the certificates for participation. And I thank everyone for participating in this lecture, and we're looking forward to seeing you at our other lectures by our top faculty members in October and November. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Kazi.
Okay, my
It was
pleasure.
very interesting.
Okay, so
And useful, I think.
I was very tired in these days. I had a lot of things to do, many deadlines, but still I tried to manage it.
Thank you very much for participating.
Okay, bye. So I can go.
Goodbye.